scales, intervals, triads, chords, chord progressions, and how they lead from home to resolution. So I know we're not going to get through all that today, but I wanted to point out we're using 74 Creative Strategies, Making Music by Dennis DeSantis with permission. Thanks, Dennis, for writing an awesome book and for letting me do this on live video. We're going to be on page 238 today, which is called Creating Harmony 1, the basics. See that? That's what I want you to look at. Find it in your PDF, find it in your copy. Get ready to work it out. We're going to do some keyboard stuff. We're going to do some keyboard stuff. We're going to talk about scales on push. That's a little background music from Dangsha. And while I'm waiting for my live stream to come up, pop in, tell me who you are, tell me who you are, tell me where you are. And oh, right, live stream. Let's see. I want to show you something. Pyong, pyong, pyong. Okay, my live stream's up. I'm going to be up in 2 seconds. Before I do that, I want to just point out about the Mixitecture member site where you can get in and learn some harmony for Ableton Live producers specifically. It's at courses.mixitecture.com. There's a block called Harmony for Ableton Live Users where we are learning how to do music theory by ear the fun way, listening to electronic music, not memorizing sharps and flats on paper, not working on a piano to get your fingers smacked with a ruler. We're actually learning from hands-on guided projects where I make these Ableton projects that you can download that have audio instructions, a MIDI instrument to play with, and then some examples to play along. So you basically play a scene, you hear beats with electronic drum loops and stuff, and then you learn how to play along with MIDI notes to make it sound cool. For example, writing a bass line, learning what notes are in the scale so you can play chords, and even play chord progression. That's what we're doing. And here is a session with live. This is not built out to be a full session lesson, but I'm just going to use it for teaching. And my live stream is, I always have to refresh my feed on the slow computer, and it takes a little second, but it's really important because I like to see your questions and see who's here and answer stuff in the chat. And what we're doing actually on live stream right now is I'm building these lessons specifically for people to use them. So when we do it live on chat, click to expand. Oh my goodness, this computer's making me crazy. The point of doing it on live chat is so that I can see your questions first before I build the full lesson. That way I know what you think is confusing and what is easy for you, so we can make a lesson inside the Ableton project that actually works to help you learn stuff the fun way. There we go. All right, Etienne's here, Matt's here, Gabor's here somewhere. It's time to take off one layer and tell me if you can hear everything. Okay. Sorry, Dangsha, I gotta mute that. Now, this is gonna be kind of a hardcore lesson, so it's not gonna be a ton of listening to beats. I'm just gonna dig in deep, read a little bit from the book, and teach you how to build scales in the real world of music theory. So, problem, you don't know enough about chords, you don't know how they work, you can't understand how to get from one chord to another, and your attempts to create interesting chord progressions never match up to the music that inspires you. I'm reading from the book. Harmony is a big topic, and covering the full range of how chords work is beyond the scope of this book. That's why we're doing it in lessons. Harmony is a big topic, that's true. But fortunately, the vast majority of what's commonly done with harmony in many types of music can be learned with just a bit of background and some basic terms. Okay, so I'm gonna translate the terms and the background and tell you how to learn harmony without banging your head on the piano. Here are some of the fundamentals. So yeah, all good. Okay, cool. Maybe I'll leave Dangsha on when I'm reading. That way we can listen to beats and I'll be your teacher and we can pretend we're in a classroom with subwoofers, which they should probably do. So most music is considered to be in a particular key. That's like key signature. So if we say it's in the key of C, that means that the note C sounds like the most stable home note for the song. There we go with a C. And how do you establish the key? How do you tell people that that's harmonic home? Well, one, with repetition by just doing it all the time, or more commonly through the use of chord progressions that sound like they want to resolve back to the home note. All right, so if this is our home key, and you hear a chord progression, you've heard that a lot. That's called a 1-4-5 basic progression. C is 1, F is 4, G is the 5th note in the scale, 1, 4, 5, 1. And it resolves back to the beginning. That's super basic. I bet you never heard it on top of this kind of music before. And that's how we establish home. Give me a quick yes or no. Do you want the music on or do you want the music off? And I'm going to plug in my Ethernet cable and make sure we have a steady stream. Didn't realize I forgot that. Doop. Hope that'll keep us going. I like hearing this music in the background so you don't have to just listen to nothing. But if it's getting in the way, let me know. So do you want the background music on or off? Let me know. Now, so we got a key signature that is harmonic home, and we established that by either playing it over and over and over again, like a track that has no chord progressions, or we established the key signature by returning after harmonic changes to resolve back to the home. Mats, the page I have is called Creating Harmony 1, the basics. I have it on page 238 in my hard copy. I didn't realize the PDF is numbered differently. I should have checked that. You got the rhythm of automation. You are a few chapters ahead. So go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like 6 chapters earlier than that. I have the rhythm of automation on page 274. I didn't even realize that was going to be a situation. Sorry about that. Okay, so we found out the PDF is numbered differently from the book. I can see already I'm going to have to do this lesson a couple times and make it smoother for the final version, but whatever. So we got the concept of home, harmonic distance. I am going to turn off this background music because that just sounded like chaos to me. How do we establish harmony? Well, we can use chord progressions that resolve back to the home sound. Home sound, we get a tension and resolution. So that's the basis of most successful chord progressions. We create tension and then we resolve back to harmonic resolution. We can talk about that more with voice leading and all kinds of things of how the chords make tension and resolution. But let's keep going. So if we have the note C as the key note or the tonic, so tonic, fundamental, home, that's all the same word for the starting note of the scale. We have scale qualities of major and minor. Now, we talked a little bit about the sound of major and minor, and those, you build them with different combinations of steps. So let's just review. What does a major sound like? Like when you buy a little kid's keyboard with only 7 notes on it, those are the ones you get. Minor has a different arrangement of steps. And basically, minor sounds like the darker, scary version. Major's the happy, bright version. There's major. Here's minor. Let's hear that same 1-4-5 chord progression in minor. It's a little darker. Major, minor. Okay, I know you know the feeling of major and minor. There's a specific way you can build a major scale and a minor scale starting from any note. So for a little vocabulary, when I say scale steps, those are like the steps in the scale. But when I say semitones, that's every key on the keyboard. So a scale has 8 steps, like we heard. And there are 12, well, a scale has 8 steps in the octave, 8, like octopus, 8, you know, but there are 12 semitones. And what I'd like you to learn eventually is how to take any note that you start with and be able to build a major scale and a minor scale starting from that note by knowing the arrangement of steps. So I started on A flat and built a major scale. What if I want a minor scale? What is that, B? So what am I doing? I'm playing with different combinations of steps. So Dennis is talking about a couple MIDI notes, a couple of, page 203. Now in the book, we have a couple of MIDI notes and a little bit of 5-line staff with whole notes on the page showing you the names and what they look like. We're not really reading music, so let's keep going. So every major scale has 7 notes and the same pattern of intervals between notes, combination of half steps. So a half step is 2 notes that are next to each other. And on push, I didn't get into scales on push. Do we have a chromatic layout? I don't even know where to find that yet. I like in-key chromatic. In-key chromatic, okay. So on the push, when you have, I have a chromatic set up with the major scale highlighted. So the lit up notes are going to give you scale tones and the other ones are in between. So if we're on push, you can see there's spaces between the pads. I'm not playing every pad, same as on here. I'm not playing every one. So how do you know which ones to skip and how do you know which ones to play? If you have just a plain piano with nothing else in the world, how do you know which notes to touch to make that sound of a major scale or a minor scale? Likewise, if you walk up to a push and you're listening to a track and you find the note that's in the key, like you find the home note, you're like, okay, I got the home note, I got the center. Now, how do I build a scale to play along with it? Well, this is one thing that's going to take a little bit of memorization or a little bit of practice or both. And it goes with the pattern of half and whole steps, okay? So and we had to learn this in music school. For a major scale, it goes whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And I would write down WWH, WWWH. So let's look at what that means, because that is something you're going to actually need to do and practice and play with, mostly so you get the sound of it in your ear and the feel of when the scale is right. And once you know how it sounds, you'll be able to figure it out by ear and stop making mistakes. So it's not piano playing class, but it is something you're going to learn. Let's just do an analysis here. We're going to count half steps. And remember, a half step is just the space between two notes. It's the smallest distance you can go. So to make a major scale, we go whole step first. A whole step is like two half steps. So the first note is to here. And then we have another whole step. So our first three notes are these three. Next, we have a half step. So from E to F, there's no black key in between. It's only a half step. Half step is the shortest difference. So we get these four notes. Because the intervals we're making are a whole step, a half step, then we got three more whole steps, and the final one is a half step to get up to C. What do we get if we have a half step from B? Oh, it's C. It's the next step. So in the major scale, when you start on C, the half steps are between E and F, and then B and C, which makes it really easy to remember. If you start on the C major note, you can see that it takes two semitones to get to the white notes, and then a half, and then a whole, 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 half. Whole, root, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So the notes that we actually found are the white notes. Let me know if that makes sense so far. I feel like a little bit like I'm teaching super basic stuff, and I don't want to talk to you like you're stupid, because I know you're smart, but I want to translate what's in the book to what we're hearing and make it make sense without really using the 5-line staff paper, because I know nobody's writing music on staff paper anymore. Maybe somebody has Sibelius and they're translating it. So how about a minor scale? Different combination of intervals. So we're going to build this starting on the note C. When it says whole step, we go two semitones. Whole step is two semitones. So from C, the first note is a whole step away. That's two semitones. Okay, so our first note is D. Our second note is E. Now we have a half step. From D, we go up here. So our first three notes are this. That's C, whole step, half step. And now it gets interesting because we go a whole step from here. Whole step. So our first four notes. Another whole step. So our first 5 notes. And now a half step. Now from this half step, we go up a whole step. So we're going to play that note. And finally, another whole step to end it. So our scale sounds like this, which gives us the minor sound. And that is so cool. If you just get that part out of what we did today, you'll be able to build a major scale and a minor scale on any note in the book. How about, what's this look like on push? I've never actually done this before to try and teach it on push, because we didn't have these in the kindergarten when I was teaching music. I actually did teach music in a kindergarten. Believe me, we did not talk about half steps. We talked about, like, I don't even want to sing the songs. They'll get stuck in my head again. I wrote some songs to teach them the days of the week and the counting the numbers. I was really teaching English using music. It wasn't in the US. So I was like using the piano to teach music Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, stuff like that. So let's find the note C on our push. And it's set up in major scale. So let's go through the notes that are lit up and see how far apart they are and see if we can make a major scale and see if we can count the steps and see if this whole thing makes sense, or should I light it on fire right now? Okay. All I'm doing is playing the lit up notes. Can you see my push well enough? I know it's a little bit far away, but. All right, so I played a major scale. I got the sound. Let's count the intervals. Starting from here, we're gonna make a whole step, which is 2 semitones. Now for the next note, it's another whole step in the major scale. So we have these notes. What's the next one? Oh, it's a half step. We did a whole, half. A half step, and these two notes, yes, they're right next to each other, just like E and F. Nothing in between. Smallest interval you can get is a half step, so that's good. So we go here from C, whole step, half step. What's the next one we do after the half step? We do a whole step. Okay, that makes sense. Another whole step. Another whole step. And how do we get back home? Half step. Do we have the next note? Is home going to be a half step away? Yes, it is. Now, I know this is kind of a dumb cliffhanger because we knew it was going to work. But just to review, root note, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step. What if we go to minor? So to get here, I started on push in the notes mode, and I hit the scale button to pick out major or minor. Minor basically changes which pads are lit up. So now we're gonna play the lit up keys. Jeez, my playing is sloppy on the push, right? Trying to do it one hand. Oh, can you enlarge my camera pic to full screen? Yeah, you don't need to see Ableton at all right now. Sorry, I should have seen that picture 500 years ago. Bam. Obviously, this should be on full screen. I didn't even think of that. That's so obvious. Thanks, Matt. We need somebody with you guys need like a magic button you can press to electrocute my chair like on The Simpsons when they're like, ow, quit it. Ow, quit it. All right, maybe this works a little bit better. Let's just go through the theory of a minor scale. How do you make a minor scale? Well, I'm looking at this page in my book. I'm not sure what page is it for you. It might be page 205, but it's this page where you can see the MIDI notes and you can see the words in boldface, whole, half, whole, half, whole for a minor scale. This is the recipe. This combination of intervals is what you can use to build a scale on any note that's going to play like, it's going to sound like major or minor when you play it. So let's look at a minor scale. Okay, what's the recipe? The first thing we do is a whole step. There's a whole step, now a half step. So our first three notes. What do we do next? Whole step, half step, and then a whole step and another whole step. So to go again, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. And there you go. You get the right sound. What if we want to do that minor tonality starting on another note? Here's another way to easily remember the step order. If you haven't memorized it, you didn't write it on your hand, you didn't get it tattooed, start on the note A. Because on the piano keyboard, if you play from the white note A and play all the white notes, you'll get what's called a natural minor scale. So let's analyze the intervals we just did, starting from A, whole step, half step. Aha! Between B and C, there's a half step. So we got the half step already. We didn't have to go in between on a sharp or flat or anything. Starting over, A, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Luckily, we landed on F. There happened to be a half step right there. Very useful. Whole step, whole step. And that made it even kind of sound a little bit cool. So, page 205, yeah. Let me know if you're with me so far. We're just talking about how to build major and minor scales using the word steps. as in semitones, as in the smallest distance you can play, like notes right next to each other. And when you put them together, you can make scales by knowing the right intervals of just which notes to skip. All you need to do to be a world famous musician is, it doesn't matter what notes you play, you got to know which notes to skip. And here's a little hint: skip the wrong ones, play the right ones, right? Unless you're playing blues and you want to bend it. Lots of fun stuff. What do we do in the book? I'm trying to go here. Now let's go with a little bit of the book so we can make it make sense. All right, great. Bottom of the page. Now that we've established how major and minor scales are made, we can build chords on each of the notes in the scale. Oh my God, that's what I've been wanting to do forever. So we're going to build chords using each notes. Last time we talked about this, I got into note names and recommended that when you're spelling the chords, you pick alternating letters. So let's say you have the letters C, D, E, F, G, 5 letters. To build a chord, we're going to make a triad with we're going to skip letters, C, E, and G. That does not mean we have C, F flat, and G. Like technically E is like F flat, but you never spell a chord, a triad, like with, you have to use the letter names. And if they happen to have, if they're out of order, like you use the words sharp and flat. So this note by itself, you could say it's D sharp or you could say it's E flat. But if it's in the context of a C chord, we're going to spell it C, E flat, and G. So we can use the letter names C, E, G. And then we use the terms sharp or flat to tell us if it's, the white key or the black key. That keeps it simple. So anytime, if you have a D chord and you're building a triad, it's going to be D, F, and A. For major, that black key, we're going to call it F sharp. We're not going to call it G flat because D, G flat, and A doesn't sound like a triad. It sounds like something else. So for spelling, use alternating letters, and then we'll learn to use the words sharp and flat to make it make sense. Now, how do you build a chord? The word is triads. How does Dennis explain this? The most common chords are triads, which are built by adding the third and fifth notes above a starting note, or the root. Okay, the third and the fifth notes. So we know the scale. You pick the third note and the fifth note, and you get a triad. What's in the C major scale? Okay, the third note is E, and the fifth note is F. Let's build a D major scale. I'll play it for you. So there's our root note D. Let's find the third note and the fifth note. Okay, how about on the next one, E? Third note, fifth note. Oh, when you play a triad on E, in the key of D, you get an E minor chord. So when we're in the key of D, here's the key of D. We're going to build a chord on each note. So the D chord is major. The E chord is minor. Let's find out the F. Oh, it's F sharp. Not G flat because we went D, E. Now we need an F. And because the D major scale goes whole step, we're starting on this note. It's F sharp. So let's go to the third note of the scale, or the third. We count up 3, right? There's a third, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sounds to me like, well, what's the quality of this chord? The D chord is major. E chord is minor. What's the F sharp chord? Type in what you think it is, if it's major or minor, your guess. I'm going to keep going. The next note is G, right? D, E, F sharp, G. We're going to build a triad on the note G. So we go G, A, B, C, D, G, A, B, C, D, G, B, D. The notes we want to use are G, B, D. Aha, we got a triad. Waiting for somebody to type in if this chord is major or minor. How's it sound? And now we're up to G. I'll give this one away. That's a major chord. So we have D, E minor, F sharp, minor. G is back to major. Now let's build that A chord. Aha, A is back to major also because the seventh note of the scale is this C sharp right here, because we need to have a half step before the top of the octave. So when I start with A, I play C sharp and E to get an A major triad. B is going to be a little rough. Oh, B is minor again. And then C, even more rough. That's technically called a diminished chord. Well, it's a diminished triad. And then we're back to D. So all I did was I took the notes of the scale, played triads, and got chords on each root, on each note. Let me know if you're with me so far. This gets to be really useful when you're listening to a track and you hear a bass line and you get the bass line notes. If you can pick out the root notes of the chords in that song, if you can play along with a song and play the right bass line notes, you're 99% of the way done with harmonizing that track. Because after that, you play the bass line, you listen to the track, and you just feel like, is that major or minor? And you try playing one, you know? You play along with it, and if that doesn't sound right, try the minor version. How do you switch between major and minor? You got to count the steps. Whole step, right? Or it could be a whole step and then a half step. I'm not sure if anybody's commenting or not. This is why it would be nicer to be in a classroom so I could actually ask you questions and you could answer. So we built some triads using the notes of the scale, and Dennis showed us a picture of the 7 triads in C major. I don't think this picture is going to be amazingly helpful, but because I know you're probably not reading music, but if you had a MIDI file with those notes in there, would that help? Do you want to have an Ableton project with the MIDI notes where you can play and listen to the chords? Matt says, yes, it makes sense. All right, thanks. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Ableton project, record MIDI files where you have the chords, like one MIDI clip with each chord, and then you'll be able to see the notes. You can play the keyboard to make the notes light up on the same way, and then you know you're playing the right note. So you'll be able to hear it, see it, play it, touch it, and put it on top of a piece of audio so it fits into the context of a track. And that's where it gets to be fun. This part is kind of like, yeah, I'm talking through the theory, but I want to read this book today, and we've got oh boy, a bunch of more pages. So here, back to the book. We referred earlier to the terms major and minor as being the quality of the key or the scale. That's that happy, sad, dark, light thing. The triads in a particular key also have major or minor quality, and as with scales, this is determined by the interval distances between the notes. So major triads have 4 half steps. I'm not going to read all the math of it. You can read that. With this information, we can analyze and determine the quality of each triad in a particular key simply by counting semitones. So that's what I did. I just built triads starting on every key, and we listened to how they're major and minor and looked at the semitones of space between each one. If this is too confusing for you with white and black notes, play them all on the white notes. C major. You can even keep your fingers in the same position. Do, 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 bow, now, now, bow, now. Lean on me. Bow, bow, now, now, now. Bow, now, now, now. Yeah, bow, now, now, dum, now, now, bow. You've heard this before. That's what they did. I think Lean on Me was like a song somebody wrote really early in their career, and they were probably just doing it that way. Gus Buzz, how you doing? Dakota, what's going on? Dakota, I think we had a chat like a million years ago. I forget. Anyway, so we started off talking about the definition of semitones, which is the smallest unit of space on a scale. And then we looked at whole steps and half steps, where a whole step is like 2 semitones, half step is 1 semitone. We looked at how to build a scale in major and minor using semitones and whole steps and half steps on the piano keyboard, and also on the push, where if you set it to chromatic display, you can see which notes to play, and now you can understand why there is space between them. And so when we want to build a chord, the simplest version of a chord is a triad, which has 3 notes. Spell it using alternating letters. So if you start on C, it's going to be C, E, and G. It might be E flat, it might be not, whatever. D is going to be D, F, and A, E, G, B, right? C, E, G, D, F, A, E, G, B. C, G, B, D, A, C, E, B, D, F, C, E, G. The spelling uses alternating letters to keep it simple so you can recognize it. And then we use sharps and flats if we need to modify the third note to make it major or minor. Major, minor. F, A, C, and A flat makes it minor. Sharps and flats are referred to as accidentals. That's a word I didn't invent, but if it has a little sharp or a flat after it, said, oh, that's an accidental to make it, a different sound. So that's basically how we build triads. And back to the book. If you actually went through and measured the intervals in each of the triads, you probably noticed 2 of these chords don't fit into either major or minor pattern. The 7 chord in the major scale and the 2 chord in the minor scale are of a different quality called diminished. If you play the C major scale and you get up to B, and you build a triad with B, D, and F, using the notes from the C major scale, which right now means all white notes, that's a different quality. It sounds kind of scrunched. And in the old time movies, they would hear like when the real danger came in, it would be this sound. And they would go like that to be like the bad guy's about to drop a safe on your head. That's called diminished. So let's review some chord qualities you might not know. Here is B major, just for the sound. Happy. Here's B minor. A little darker, a little kind of ominous. Now we're going to get B diminished. Pretty bad, and with a diminished 7th on top. Wait. There we go. Really bad sound. So diminished triads, like minor triads, have 3 half steps between the root and the third note, but they only have 6 half steps between the root and the 5th, as opposed to 7 for the usual minor or major triads. Diminished triads are labeled with the superscript little circle after the Roman numeral. They talked about Roman numerals in the book, which I didn't mention. Here they are underneath the 5-line staff. You can see on that line Roman numerals, which makes it kind of easy because instead of saying like, oh, the C chord or the D chord in C is minor, you can just say in the key of C, the 2 chord is minor. Using the number gets us towards talking about chord functions so that in the future you can be able to say, like when I said a 1-4-5 progression, that doesn't mean it has to be the notes C, F, and G. I could start on anything. I could start on A. How do you play 1-4-5 in A? Well, you go 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I'm going to have A, D, and E. To make a 1-4-5 progression, we know what 1-4-5 is going to sound like. Then you take those numerals, pick the scale you're playing with, build the triads, and play the chords. And that all happens in like 0 seconds when you're on stage and somebody's like, yeah, let's do this song in G minor. And you're like, all right, I got to play 1-4-5 in G minor. And you got to just like zip. It's like in the Matrix when they get into that helicopter and they're like, I didn't know how to fly this helicopter. And they're like, brrr, and they get the info and then they can fly the helicopter. Transposing the different keys is like that. Once you learn all this stuff, you don't sit there and be like, how many semitones, how many half steps? It's not like that at all. You just learn it and you think it, and then you can think harmonically at the keyboard and actually play the stuff right in the flow. It is that fast. Even if this sounds technical and sounds like a lot of gibberish, it does get to be part of your brain. It actually becomes part of your muscle memory, so you can reach out and touch chords and just play. What was I doing? 1-4-5 and A, right? Down, bow, bow. And you can play it. And here's some encouragement. It might sound surprising, but a huge amount of music from the classical period all the way to a lot of contemporary and pop and electronic music uses only the 7 chords that exist in a particular key, which are called the diatonic chords. Diatonic means when you take a note, play a scale, and then build a triad on top of each note, only using the notes in the scale. You'll get 7 chords. They each have a specific sound that's always the same in every key, no matter where you are. And those are the diatonic chords, which means they come from that key signature. Chromatic means they're not from that key signature. So remember I said there's 12 semitones? That's the chromatic scale, starting from C. If I play the C major scale, that's the diatonic scale, meaning those are the notes that are in that scale. So diatonic and chromatic are kind of like cousins. Chromatic is the one that never had any rules and can't tie its shoes. Diatonic is the one that's always proper. Trying to make this something you could relate to. So most songs use no more than 2 or 3 of these chords, like 1, 4, and 5. But the choice and order of diatonic chords is what determines how the chord progression really sounds. So what follows in this little picture are a few general guidelines that can help you move from one chord to the next. And Roman numerals are referring to the major scale, but the patterns are similar for minor scales. So now we're getting into chord function. And if you have any questions, let me know. We're up to about a half an hour. I'll see if I can play through some of these. And I'm looking at this little picture on the bottom that looks like, get the shadows off of there. Do you see that with the numbers and the arrows? Those are describing departure and resolution. So we're going to make some little journeys. And what would really be fun, I had this great teacher who would say, call out numbers. He'd say, give me a number from 1 to 7. And he'd start with 1 and say, give me a number from 1 to 7. And we'd all go and like shout out different numbers. And then he would play a song making chords with the numbers that we shouted out. And we were like, how did you do that? It's amazing. Which was a cool exercise. But we're not going to do exactly that. I'm going to type something in because I want to give you a better understanding of what those chord functions are. So I'm going to type into the chat 1, 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. 147 36251. That's not my phone number. That's that's a picture of which chords, how the chords go from one to the next. So traditionally in this Western world of harmony, let's play through this a little bit right here. So we start the 1 chord. Next is 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Did that sound a little bit like something you might have heard before? Let's do that again. 1, 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. All right. It's a pretty traditional progression, especially in jazz. You'll hear like a 2-5-1, which is just like, it's kind of like saying, how do you get back home real quick? Oh, 2-5-1, whatever. Let me do that again. Okay, so I'm skipping ahead too fast. Let's do it again in minor. So we did that progression in minor, 1, 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Using Roman numerals to describe each chord, and the chords are triads, and the triads are built on top of the notes in the scale, and we're using only the scale tones, which means in C, we were playing all white notes. Now I'm going to play C minor. No, let's play A minor. You'll be able to actually do this at home. If you play all the white notes in A minor, we're going to go from 1 through that cycle of numbers. So 1, 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Let's do that again. 1, 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Checking for comments over here. There is a lot of songs that use this chord progression, and sometimes when you go to a jam session and people are getting warmed up, somebody will just start doing that for exercises, and then as people join in, you immediately get a sense of what level of musicianship people have, where the rock musicians are playing all power chords, and the jazz musicians are like playing crazy stuff with 7th chords on top of all that. Let me know if you have any questions. I do want to get through this chapter today, but I don't know if we're going crazy fast. And honestly, to build all this stuff out into hands-on lessons, I think we're going to do a bunch of different projects where one of them is going to be like, play a major scale, here's the MIDI notes, here's how it sounds. Then we're going to do play a minor scale in a different Ableton project, different audio, play along, or a different example. And then we'll go through playing chords and some chord progressions and things. I don't want to push it too fast because I want you to be able to actually do this yourself. But there's a big advantage for anybody who has push. You can grab your scale layouts and basically be able to play the scales right away without memorizing sharps and flats or learning whole steps and half steps, which is a cool advantage. Jeff Hayes, do you know any type of house techno type of progressions? Yeah, super fast, but I nailed it. All right, cool. House and techno progressions. Yes, and let's see if I can blend this in with some examples. Well, let me do this example from the book before I get into 7th chord. So this progression, on the top of this page, I have page 244. Right up there, there's a progression. I know that was out of focus, but just to show you what the page looks like. 1, 5, 6, 4. All right. What does that progression sound like in the key of C? We're going to play 1, 5, 6, 4. Is that in major or minor? Doesn't say. 1, 5, 6, 4. 1, 5. What's the sixth chord in C? C, D, E, F, G, A. So I need the notes A, C, and E. So 1, 5, 6, 4. Oh. With or without you? And I wait. You don't want to hear me sing that. How many times have you seen a cover band play With or Without You? I didn't know that was 1, 5, 6, 4. And a bunch of other ones. So Jeff is asking about chord progressions for house music. A lot of it is chromatic and uses seventh chords. So I'll skip a little faster here. To make a seventh chord, it's like a triad, and then you add another note on top, and the note skips. So to make a seventh chord in C, you're going to play C, E, and G from the triad, and then add a B on top. And a lot of house music, well, I don't know if I should say a lot, but sometimes there were synth patches where you could play a one-note chord progression. Do we have? I'm gonna grab an Ableton patch where in the piano and keys thing in Simpler, there is a patch called. Let me go back into full screen so you can see what the heck I'm talking about. And live. Okay, so here I am in Simpler with my cheap electronic piano. I'm gonna hit my hot swap button, go down here to electric piano C minor 7 chord. Ooh, what's that gonna be about? I'm just hitting one note. And put a house beat on that. And you could have some house music. All I'm doing is playing the chord quality of minor seventh and moving that minor seventh chord up and down the scale to play it on different notes. A ton of house music sounds like that. And it's not like a functional chord progression like, 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Doesn't really come from that because they're just playing cool sounds and it's got a complex sound to it, but it's not like something you have to learn the Roman numerals and explain it. So what was that we just heard? I'll try and do that same kind of thing. Ba, ba, ba. So here's a C minor triad with 3 notes, C, E, and G, and the E is flat because it has a whole step and then a half step. Let me know if that's answering your question at all, Jeff. You can take, for house, a minor 7 kind of sounds cool. That's sort of just because you've heard it a lot and, and that's what's in a lot of the music. But if you want to make something that sounds like cool, housey, jazzy music, take a minor 7th chord and just play it around on different starting notes. Do it in a rhythm with a house beat, and it's going to sound kind of roughly a little bit like house music. And and then you might want to think about what's the bass line you're going to play. maybe I should do it this way. Need a bigger piano. Do. Yeah. And fool around with that. Right, mess around later at work though, just on a smoke break. Thanks. That was a little bit sloppy because that's not a great answer. And what I really wanted to be able to do is take some famous house tracks, analyze them, grab the chords, break them down into MIDI notes, give them to you so you can play along. Would that be cool? That's pretty damn close to copyright infringement, but in the US, copyright law does allow you to use pieces of published work for teaching. So maybe we should take some famous house tracks. Not feeling for you. Analyze the chord progressions and give you MIDI notes where you can play those chords along with the track. I don't know if everybody would be into that, but I probably would have been into that when I was doing music theory. My teachers didn't know any house music though. We learned Autumn Leaves. The autumn leaves all on my window. All down my window. No, not even. So let's bring this back a little bit. Chord progressions that follow these guidelines are said to be functional. So back to this chart. If you missed a couple pages ago, we're looking at the chart on the bottom of this page. Let me get back in full screen. You guys got to hit my electric chair buzzer to put me back in. Back in camera land. So down there at the bottom of that page, there's this diagram. And it says things like, oh, from the one chord, we could skip out to 4. And if we're at 4, after that, we should go to 7 and back to 1. Or we could go from 4 back to 5 and go to 1. Or we could go 1, 4, 5, 6. You know, there's like different charts, different functions. What do those all mean? What it really means is you grab this chart, you play those chords, you feel how it feels to go from one chord to the next, and you'll get a sense of what sounds good to you and what you want to play. The chord progressions are said to be functional because each chord functions as a preparation for the next chord in the series. So there is, of course, a much wider world of harmonic possibilities available beyond just using diatonic triads. Diatonic means using the notes from the scale. Triads means you pick alternating notes and build a chord using the notes from the scale. But if you're interested in creating music that's within the realm of pop music, you can get quite far using only these 7 chords, which is very handy. Side note, a lot of the theory behind the construction of scales and triads might seem like arbitrary rote memorization. It does, that's right. Why did these particular combinations of whole and half steps come to define the scales that are commonly used? Why do certain chords have a feeling of wanting to move to other chords? Good question. Why do these scales and chords exist at all? We want answers, damn it. Detailed answers are beyond the scope of this book, but largely have to do with acoustics. The intervals of the major scale can be derived from fairly simple whole number frequency ratios that correspond to the overtone series. I want to talk about that for a second. What he's saying, he's asking the question, why does a major scale have whole and half steps? Why does it have 7 notes? Why? Well, there is some physics and math in this where I'm going to go into Ableton and show you using Spectrum Analyzer, my favorite plugin in the Ableton world. It doesn't even make any sound. That's how much I love it. Audio effects, Spectrum with the special preset for fast response right here. Now, I know you know how Spectrum works because I talk about it 9 million times, but when you play a note and you put the mouse on the peak, you can look in the little box and it's going to tell you the name of a note and a pitch. And this is amazingly useful for EQing because EQ8 operates in the world of frequencies with numbers in hertz. What the hell pitch is that? How does anybody know? This little box is amazing because it tells you the answer. So here's a note C. I put my mouse on the line. On that peak in the little box, it says C3, 262 hertz. Now C3 might be 267, 265. Oh, C3, yeah. Let's say 265, okay? Now, let's go up the octave. Where's the next peak? It's up here. Okay, let's figure out the frequency. Put the mouse on the note. Read in a little box. Oh, C4. Okay, so in the MIDI language, it's up the 4th octave on the keyboard rather than the 3rd octave. And what is that note? 529. Can we say 530? Would that be safe to say 530? Wait, let's check out C lower down here. 265. Okay, so if C3 is at 265, who can multiply 265 by 2? Does 265 times 2 come up to 530? I know the answer. It does. You can find the pitch of any note by doubling the frequency. What am I saying? You can find the pitch of octaves. An octave is doubling a frequency or cutting in half. So what's half of 265? That'd be 132 and a half, right? Let's go down the octave. Find the next C down here. Put the mouse on the peak. Oh my gosh, 132 hertz, 133 hertz. So that is half the frequency. And then look at that. Even though I'm playing the note down here, the next higher peak is on the note C, and the next peak above that is on the note G. What is G in the scale? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. G is the fifth. Holy crap. So when Dennis DeSantis is talking about the acoustics of sound and the physics of sound and how come there's a mathematical reason for why notes sound good together, understand that every note contains a harmonic of the fifth above it in its own note. There's the C, the next harmonic is on the octave above, and the next harmonic above that is the fifth. So if we're here in the overtone series, believe it or not, when you play one note, the C, harmonically we're hearing this. Even though those upper two ones are really quiet, they're still there in a very subtle way, which is why a piano sounds better than a sine wave out of a pure sine wave out of a synth. That gets into some crazy stuff with physics, and I don't want to go very much deeper into that, except to say that this does all make sense. Octaves are double the original pitch. The relationship of a fifth is a 3 to 2 relationship, perfect integers, like mathematically. And I think a perfect fourth is a 4 to 3, but we didn't really talk about intervals. So what we're going to talk about next time is not exactly chords, but just intervals. So what does it sound like when you play? An interval is a combination of 2 notes only. A chord is 3 notes, but when you have only 2 notes, it's an interval. And it's really interesting to learn these because these are the foundations of chords. So let's just listen to some intervals. How about a second? We play the 2 notes in the scale, first and then second. I hear 2 notes that are kind of smashed together. Let's play the interval of a third. So the first note and the third note. That sounds kind of consonant. The second sounds a little bit dissonant, like it's not really resolved. Here's a more consonant interval. How about a fourth? Okay, that sounds good. How about a fifth? That sounds harmonically locked in. That's a very stable interval, powerful interval. And remember, the note C has the overtone of the fifth in there. Complicated physics, but those 2 notes lock in together because the G is basically amplifying the harmonics we heard in the C. How about a sixth? Kind of sweet, kind of sad. A little bit unstable, like it wants to resolve somewhere. How about a seventh? Ooh, that's dissonant. That does not sound very good at all. It wants to go somewhere else and stop doing that. So how about here? The octave. Peace. Finally back home again. Intervals are how you build triads, and triads make chords, and chords make chord progressions. Chord progressions make departure and return from harmonic home. You go on a little journey, you come back, and you're back at the beginning again. That is chapter 1 on learning theory. And if that sounds like we just did a lot in 54 minutes, it's because we did do a lot. When I was in music school, in Theory 1, well, we had a whole semester called Elementary Musicianship where we learned notes, like how to name the note, how to find it on the 5-line staff, what's the difference between F sharp and G flat. There's F, there's G, there's F sharp, there's G flat. So that black key right there is F sharp and G flat, and it's the same key, same physical key on the keyboard. We learned all that stuff, and then in Theory 1, for 3 months, in theory one, for 3 months, for 3 days a week, for an hour a day, so 3 hours a week, we spent 3 hours a week learning how to build a scale with whole and half steps, how to stack up those steps into intervals, how to stack up the intervals into triads, getting from basic triads to seventh chords, and then the basics of chord progressions, but we didn't even really get into chord progressions until theory 2. So we literally spent 3 months making triads, having exams on how to write them on paper. I had this professor who had a professor who would come in and be like, "We're gonna have a little surprise quiz today," and he would drop like a 4-page exam, and none of it was hard. It was all easy, but the thing was, we had so many chords to write that you did not have time to think. You had to know the patterns, and then you had to get pattern recognition so you could see it on paper, hear it in your mind, fill in the sharps and flats, look at the key signature, all that stuff. Oh my gosh, that was hard. So I know this took an hour today, and we're going to have to do this lesson again in different ways with different keys. And hopefully I'm going to do it inside Ableton with tracks you can play along with, maybe even house tracks where I can tell you the MIDI notes, give you the chords, and you can actually play it to have some fun doing it. Because honestly, if I was learning this, I wouldn't want to watch somebody on video talking about it. I would want to grab a keyboard, play it, hear it, have some fun, and feel it, right? Because that's what we're doing with music. So that's where we're going to go. Mats, the 7th chord can sound weird sometimes. Do you know why? No, I don't, because that question doesn't give me enough context. But if you can tell me which 7th chord or what you're hearing around it, before it or after it or whatever, like if you're listening, if you have a preset that's going to play a minor 7th, and then you try to play that minor 7th chord on top of every different bass line note, the answer of why it sounds weird is because you're not getting harmonic resolution, and probably you're playing some notes that are not from the scale. So 7th chords have 4 notes in them, and if you're just whipping through a bunch of 7th chords, if you're hitting some notes that are not in the scale, that's why it could sound weird. You also have to know how to make a dominant 7th chord. So here's C minor, there's G minor 7. I'm going to play the difference between a G minor 7th and a G major 7th, or a G minor 7th and a G dominant 7th. There's C minor. That's with a G dominant. Try not to use too many words. Let me play with a G minor 7th. That doesn't quite have resolution. It goes back and forth. But if you play C minor with a G dominant 7th, that B natural leads back to C. But when you have G minor 7th, we're playing a B flat that doesn't have such a strong push back to C because it's farther away. So it keeps it more like in a groove where it's going from one chord to the next instead of resolving strongly from the dominant back to the root. A bunch of theory language. I meant the 7th chord in the scale, like VII. Okay, why it sounds weird, the 7th chord is diminished. That's the answer. I wasn't sure. Yes, okay, the 7th chord has 4. Okay, why the note 7 in the scale? The chord, the 7 chord, that's the chord built on scale step 7 sounds weird because it has the wrong intervals. Let's go through this again. Here's our C major scale. Now we're going to build a chord on B with the notes B, D, and F. The reason it sounds weird is because that F is a little bit flat. To make it sound normal, it would be like this. So let's count the steps from B to F. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's count the notes from C to G. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So in a major triad, the root and the 5th are 7 semitones apart. But in the B diminished chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If we spell the chord B, D, F, and we use only the notes that are in the C major scale, which are the white notes, B, D, and F, the 7 chord is diminished. The quality is not major. It's not even minor. It's diminished, which means basically flat 3, flat 5, which is that sound of impending doom. So, and that's going to be the same in any scale. Anytime you play a major scale, the 7 chord is going to be diminished. If you're in a minor scale, let's play a B chord using the notes from C minor. Now we have B flat. So when you're in a minor scale, the 7 chord is kind of cool because you're using notes that make a major chord. But in major tonality, the 7 chord is diminished. That's why it sounds weird. Got it. All right, good. So we had a little terminology wrestling match right there. Let's just see what's next in the book. Creating Harmony 1, the basics. Next chapter. Creating Harmony 2, beyond triads, and we get into 7th chords. Perfect. So that's just what we were getting up to right now. Let me read the last page of this chapter because this is kind of cool. Back to the book. Detailed answers are beyond the scope of this book, but largely have to do with acoustics. So he's explaining why do certain chords want to resolve? Why do they want to push back to the home? Kind of acoustics and physics a little bit. But perhaps even more importantly, much of this theory is descriptive rather than prescriptive. So the theory was developed to explain patterns in music that already existed rather than telling composers what they should do in the future. Okay? That is so important. Music theory is a way for us to describe what already happened using common language that everybody can understand. So if we're hanging out and you're on keyboard, I'm on bass, and you're playing something and it's amazing, I was like, what's that progression? And you could be like, oh, I did a 2-5-1 off the 3 chord. And like, oh, okay, cool. So that's like something that was, I didn't get it. And then the other person told me 2-5-1 is a chord progression starting from note 3 in the scale, which is something jazz musicians might do to just quickly get back to 1 and jazz it up a little bit, literally jazz it up a little bit. So we're working on a way to make a common language that explains what happens harmonically so we can communicate and share ideas, share bass lines. So you could put chords on my bass line, so I could put a melody on your bass line. So you can hire somebody to play a bass line and put it on your chords. A million other applications of this. I'm working with a vocalist right now, and I got a track, and she's singing melody notes, and I'm just like, this is so cool. We can communicate together. We don't have to talk in the language of theory, but when we're going through the process of departure and return or creating harmonic resolution, there are things that need to come up like that. So I'm going to build some more Ableton projects. And if you're in, you know what we're going to do? The last thing is, because I know a couple people watching this are going to be doing the harmony course. I'm going to open up the most recent session lesson I just built, which is Harmony Example 2 that I just packed up on a live pack, so it's not in there anymore. Let me grab this session. You get to see my file browser. How exciting. Harmony for electronic musicians. Move my window. Session lesson 2, Live 9 project. Open. Boom. This is the session lesson for Harmony Example number 2, where we're playing along with some audio and playing bass lines. All right, let me make sure it's not going to come out too loud. Here's a little example. Yeah, I saved this with audio outs 1 and 2 instead of what I'm using on my sound card, which is 17 and 18. So I built a new lesson. It goes like this. Welcome to Learning Harmony Part 2. We are going to play a bass line using different notes and create the foundation of chords, believe it or not. So the name of the game here is to start with the root note of the bass line. First, we're going to write a bass line with 1 note, just the root. Then we're going to write a bass line with 2 notes using the root and the octave, and you're going to learn what those mean. After that, we're going to write a bass line with 3 notes using the root, the fifth, and the octave, and you're going to learn what those notes mean. Finally, okay, so this is a session lesson where we're going to go through instructions, examples, and activities. Beginning is audio instructions. Level 1, play a bass line with a single note, and it sounds a little bit like this. There's the synth example. There's the audio file for you to play along with. And then it's going to be your turn. Now it's your turn. I want to make sure you have the right note. So here's a MIDI clip with the B flat. So I give you the actual note to play, and then I give you empty space to play it. So you can grab your keyboard and you can play along using the right note to hear how it sounds and have some fun doing it. We talk about things like rhythm and pitch. We talk about how to play the root and the octave with examples. And then I give you activities to do the same exact thing inside live, listening to actually cool music and playing along on your keyboard with some notes in Ableton, not watching videos. Level 3, root plus fifth. That means using the note number 1 and note number 5, which is 7 semitones away. And if you get lost, you can actually look and see exactly what notes to play. And it gives you an idea of how it sounds. Notice in Ableton it says A sharp number 2, but of course we know A sharp is the same as B flat. Finally, we do root plus third plus octave. We are sneaking up on the topic of chords. First, we played a bass line with just one note. A note is just a note, that was B flat. Then we played a bass line with two notes, the root and the fifth. We learned about how the fifth locks in with the root to make a sound that sounds good, and the word for that is an interval. An interval is a combination of two notes that have a specific feel. So the cool thing about these is that I'm teaching you a little bit of harmony, a little bit of music theory, some definitions you need to know, and then I give you examples where you can actually see the exact notes to play right there in live, so that when it's your turn to do the activity, you can listen to real music, play along with your keyboard, and you know the right notes that are going on. You know how to explain, oh, I'm playing a B flat minor chord because these are the notes and it sounds minor. And then we go through and review. I talk about what we did and what it means. Let's do a quick review of, and I even use some follow actions to skip through the clips so you can listen to those and just let it go right into your brain and have it all make sense. Where do you find all this stuff? Little bit of a sales pitch for you. I want everybody to join this, and it's super cheap right now. This is priced at like pay what you want. It's almost free. In the Harmony section, so you go to courses.mixatexture.com, click into the Harmony course. Come on, computer, there you go. And you can see we're working on some modules. So right now I'm just building module 1, which is about building bass lines. Then we're going to have some session lessons on building scales, building intervals, building triads, building chords. That's a lot like triads, and building chord progressions. Inside of each one of these lessons, you open it up and you get to download an Ableton project that has audio instructions, automated examples like those, and then activities where you actually learn by doing it. I think this is super fun because it feels a little bit like we're hanging out because you listen to me on audio, but you get to close the internet, close Facebook, close YouTube, close all your distractions, only play in Ableton, do it as many times as you want on loop. I give you the exact MIDI notes to play with and the music to play along with, so you can actually learn by ear. You know you're doing it right. You're going to make some mistakes. Who cares? That's the fun part. But you basically get to jam and just play music and learn by playing it so you know how it feels. That's what it's all about. So if you're down with that, grab the Harmony course, and it's like pay what you want. This is going to be, I mean, when I remember what I paid for music school, I was in New York paying at least $5,000 a semester for school, plus room and board, and living in the city and having to work the whole time. It was like multiple thousands of dollars to have somebody stand up there in the chalkboard and tell me to memorize sharps and flats and intervals and, counting up triads and everything. So this course is going to be a bunch more money when it's done, but right now you can join pretty cheap and help me build it by doing feedback like we're doing in the live chat right now and help me make the session lesson. So thanks a lot for hanging out, everybody. I'm going to wrap it up for today. I put up the schedule in the Facebook group of what's coming up tomorrow and for the rest of the week. We're going to do some mixing vocals, a little bit of pre-mastering, and I'll probably break open and show you a couple more session lessons as I get them built. So that's what's going on. Thank you so much for hanging out with me during our strange period of quarantine when we all have lots of studio time, to put it nicely. If you have any more questions, type them in. Thanks for all the questions. Oh, I missed one from Maxime. Sorry, Maxime. So is every single C sound including this G frequency, or is it due to the patch you're using? Every single note has overtones that will show up with that note G above it. So things like a piano that has a rich sound are going to have more overtones. Something like a flute with a pure sine wave has quieter overtones that you don't hear as loudly, but they're still there. Basically, a vibrating string is going to have overtones. A guitar, like a bass. Vibrating strings have overtones that take place at different lengths along the string that you can measure. Synthesizers, it might depend on the patch because, oh, Matt's is back. Yeah, sounds have a different volume of overtones. So the overtones are always there, but some sounds they're louder and buzzier. Like a saxophone has crazy loud overtones. It's like squonk. And electronic sounds not always as clear. In general, if things are vibrating and making physical air move, like the reed of a saxophone or the string of a piano or guitar, the overtones are going to be a little more present and make more sense to your ear. And sounds that are more electronic maybe don't have as many overtones. I'm not sure if that's a perfect answer, but a beginning of the answer. Good question, good question. Sorry I missed that till just now. I hope you get that answer. Yeah, that's it for now. All right, thanks everybody. Any soundtrack? No soundtrack for Steve. Just got to take it out naked. All right, time.